So did you happen to see what time it is? Well, it's time to do a Python challenge. That's what time it is. So anyways, welcome to this channel, guys. My name is Rob. I'm with Pre-Code Camp, and we go over things like HTML, CSS, Python. And this is one of the videos where we're going to be going over guessing the number. It's a real common problem for anybody going through the learning steps of programming for them to look at and figure out. And we're going to go through that challenge. We're going to provide you with the instructional set in this video, and feel free to pause the video to go through it, but we're going to be here to go through it with you and maybe explain the thinking like a developer in trying to solve a problem. We're going to write out a couple lines of code and then we're going to test it, write out a couple more lines and test it as we go. We're not just going to assume that it's going to work. So if that is what you're looking for, then you come to the right channel. Let's go ahead and get started with the prompt. All right, so here's our prompting that we have here for guess the number. It says that this program is going to ask the user to guess a number between 1 and 100. The user will have 10 attempts to guess at this number, and then the program is going to give you feedback whether or not you guess too high or guess too low based upon what that user has typed in. And then the program will keep track of the number of attempts, and it will inform the user when it has used up all of the attempts. And so really the way to break this thing down, I'm going to probably create a function that's going to handle the startup of the game. And I'm going to go ahead and defer to a chart here. So let me go ahead and break things down from a logic point of view on what we'd like to do. And maybe there's going to be a way for us to translate that into code here. So let's go ahead and go through it. Okay, so this is my flowchart that I created here with Miro. And this is how we're going to think about this, how we're going to process this. Because inside of our function, we needed to generate a random number. We need to somehow initialize and create a variable out there to store how many attempts that we have left. And then we're going to prompt the user to guess the number that the computer has thought about, okay? And then later on, we're going to be going through this part here where we're comparing the guess that the user guess based off of the computer. And we're going to say, hey, you either got it right, or because you got it wrong, you can either be too high or too low. So that's going to be kind of like the thought process. And then it's just going to be one big entire loop to go through and go back again, because you want that user to be prompted in order to ask that question again. With just these few blocks here, we're just going to do it a few blocks at a time here. And then we will check our work and then we'll move on with the flowchart. Okay. So let's go ahead and go back to the code here. All right, so we're back in the code. One of the first things that I like to do whenever we're dealing with anything with prompting is I want to have this program, the Python file, go ahead and clear the terminal so we have a fresh terminal to work with every single time we are booting this thing up and running it. And so the way to do this, I'm going to go ahead and put in the comments here just so that you know what it's for your notes. We're going to put clear the screen. And in here, we're going to import the operating system to use. And we're going to go ahead and do the os.system. And we're going to use something that's very much like a ternary. We're going to say, hey, I want you to use the text in the terminal, in the system terminal of CLS, okay? But I only want to use that if we're on a Windows machine. And we can do that by checking, saying, hey, if the name equals new technology, that's what that stands for. Otherwise, we're going to utilize clear. And I'm on a Mac, and in order to clear the terminal, I would type the word clear, and it clears the terminal for me, right? And for Windows users, it would be CLS. It would clear the terminal. And so this is a real quick way to knock that out, okay? And of course, we can test this here with Python 3, again for Mac, and type in the file name in here and running it. We should be able to see that it automatically cleared the screen for me. But that's going to be my first step. And then we're going to get into utilizing that Miro diagram and creating a function here. All right, so let's go ahead and define the function here. And then we're going to run every single thing through it in order to start this game off. So we're going to do the definition, guess the number. And one of the first things that we had to do from our Miro board was create a random number for the computer to choose. And so I'm going to go ahead and create a new variable here. We'll call it number to guess. Now, we want to utilize the randomized function that Python gives us. And so for that, we need to import random. So let's do that. So now that we have random imported, now we can use it down here. We can say, hey, I want to have a random integer, and I want it to be between 1 and 100. Okay. Now, to test this out, we can go ahead and just do a simple print statement. And for now, we're going to go ahead and make this a string that is formatted here. And so for that, I'm just going to go ahead and put the double quotes in here, and the computer chose the random number. All right. So that way we can actually see if it did in fact get called and stored in that variable. And then later on, we can use it to test out our logic, our if then logic here in the future. So let's go ahead and call this function, and then we will go ahead and run this program. So we're going to do guess the number with the left and right parenthesis in there. And then I can come into my terminal here. I'm going to hit the up arrow once, and we can see that the computer chose the random number 10. If I do it again, I get 12, 5, 17, and we're finally seeing some larger numbers in here. So now I know that the computer is truly picking a random number between 1 and hopefully 100. Okay, so that is that first block that we just got done knocking out from our Miro board. So if you look at the next step that we have with the Miro board, it says that we need to initialize the attempts. And so this is the max attempts that are going to be allowed that we're trying to initialize a variable to. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm just going to go ahead and create a variable here called attempts. And I'm going to set that equal to 10. Okay. And then what I'm going to do a little bit of extra work here with some print statements, just to let the user know when we start the program, like I want to welcome them to the game. And then I'm also going to want to print out to the terminal how many current attempts they have. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, I went ahead and added a few print statements on here off camera, and it says here, welcome to guess the number game. You select a number between 1 and 100, and then I have this formatted string here where it says you have, and in the curly brackets, attempts to guess it. Okay, and that is drawing from this variable that we created up here. Okay, so again, we can go ahead and run this. It's not going to do much for us, but it does display the welcome message, and then it also displays how many attempts that we have left to guess it. Okay, again, I'm only keeping this top line on here until we know that the program works with guessing too high, guessing too low, and then we can remove it because it's pointless to keep it in there right now. So let's go ahead and look at the Miro board on what we have to do next. All right, so I'm glad that we're moving right along with this. We generated a random number, we initialized that to 10, and now it's time to prompt the user for a guess. And the question that we have to kind of ask ourselves is, does that need to be inside the loop or outside the loop and everything? But let's go ahead and further along with the flow here and see what happens next and when does the loop happen. So if it says on here, we're going to compare that random number that they generated to what the user guessed. And the very first thing that we want to check and knock it off the bucket list right then and there is, did they guess it correct? And if they did, let's go ahead and inform the user that they did guess it correct. Okay. And that should just end the game. Like we don't need to go any further. It just ends the game. Okay. So that's what we're going to work on first. But like I said, where does that user, where we ask the user, does it need to be in the loop? And that's when it comes down to here. Is it too high? Is it too low? And then that's when we're going to inform that user, hey, you guessed it too high. Let's decrease the number of attempts and then check to see if the attempts are 0. And if they are, then we want to inform them that the game is over. Otherwise, we want to go ahead and go all the way back to the top here and ask that user a question. So we're going to come over here and ask that user a question again. So the answer to my initial question here was, does that user question guess the number? Does it need to be inside of a loop? And in this case here, it does. So let's go ahead, go to the code. Let's create our loop, and we're only going to tackle the first one here. The first path is, hey, we guessed it right. The game should end after we inform them that they guessed the correct answer. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so I went ahead and put this comment in here that we're going to start the loop. Now, what kind of loop are we wanting to run here? A traditional loop, a while loop? And the correct answer on this one is going to be a while loop, because we don't know how many attempts they're going to be in order for them to get it. But we do know that the final time that they should go through this is if they used up all of their attempts. And so we can come in here and we can say, while the attempts are greater than 0, let's go ahead and stay inside of this loop here. And so what we want to do next is we want to go ahead and prompt the user to guess, right? But we just don't want any kind of guess. We want to make sure that guess is valid. That's where we're going to dive a little bit deeper into making sure we are making up for any kind of user error that might force our program to break. Okay. Because the thing that we have to think about is when we are taking a prompt in from the user, it is a string and we need to make it an integer. So that's one of the problems that you would face in this if we didn't convert it. But we also want to make sure that they're not typing in gibberish or an invalid integer. And so that's where we're going to do like a try and a catch, right? Or try and accept. Because if we get an error from what they type in, we want to tell them about the error and we want to handle that error. So I'm going to type a few notes in here and then we'll go ahead and tackle the problem here. So we're going to prompt the user for their guess, and then we're going to wrap it in a try accept. So let me go ahead and put that in the notes here. Okay. So the way that we're going to do this, we're going to go ahead and put a try here. And then I'm also going to put the accept. Now, this is like a catching net for us, right? We're going to try and prompt the user here. So let's go ahead and create a variable here called guess. And we want to go ahead and capture the input that the user has typed in. Okay. Now, like I said, this comes in as a string. Let's go ahead and try to convert it to an integer. Okay. So by putting this with the int, it will try to convert whatever they typed in into an integer. But what if we get an error? So we're going to do a value error on here. And if we run into this exception clause, we want to go ahead and print out to the user, please enter a valid integer. Okay. And then we want to go ahead and continue with this process, and it will re-ask the question, which is really nice. So let's go ahead and see if this works by running it in our terminal. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. So we see the enter your guess. And now I'm going to go ahead and type a string in there. I'm going to hit the enter key. It says, please enter a valid integer. Then once I do enter a valid integer, notice that we're just going through the loop again because we haven't had any kind of evaluation happen quite yet. Okay. Now, the next thing that we need to check to make our program user-proof is we want to make sure that their number that they are typing in is between the ranges of 1 and 100. So let's go ahead and do that one as well. Right, so I added this extra comment in here and also moved the terminal over to the right-hand side because I think we're going to be typing in a little more code in here and trying out a few things as we're going on. But the thing that we want to do here is we want to now check, once we got past this stage here, we know that it's an integer. And now we need to test to see, hey, do we have a valid range? And the way that we're going to go about this is we're going to say if the guess is less than 1 or the guess is greater than 100, then let's go ahead and print out the following. So we're going to say, hey, your guess is out of the range. Please guess a number between 1 and 100. And that should fix this part here. Again, we can go ahead and test this out. And I'm going to go ahead and choose 200. And it says your guess is out of range. And it just goes back through the loop. Okay. Let's go ahead and add one more thing to this because we do need to say continue. So that way it will break out of this and go right back to the beginning. Okay. Next is now we're going to go through the Miro section of, hey, they guessed it exactly right. And that is what we're going to handle next here. Okay. So these are our 3 options where we guessed it correct. And if it didn't go correct, then it either has to be too high or too low. So then we're going to see, is it too high? And if it's not too high, the only other option is it's too low. So that is how we're going to tackle this one. Let's go ahead and do the very first one. So this is another conditional where we're going to just say, hey, if the guess that the user typed in equates to the number to guess, then we can go ahead and print out utilizing a formatted string here because we want to print out however many guesses that they did it in. So let's go ahead and do that. All right. So we don't know how many guesses they've done quite yet because we haven't thought about the tracking system. But what we will do here is we want to make sure that we end the game, meaning we break out of the while loop. And so that's what we're going to do for this part here. We're just going to go ahead and do a break. Now, let's go ahead and test this portion out. Again, I'm going to clear this out and then I'm going to run the program. So the computer chose 46. I know that because we printed it out at the very beginning. And I'm going to go ahead and choose that number of 46. And I want to see that I exited the game and it printed out that statement of congratulations. So let's test this out. There we go. Congratulations. You guessed the number. It was 46. Perfect. That if check worked. All right, let's go back and knock out the rest here. Okay, so now we're at a point where we can either check to see if it's too high or we can check to see if it's too low. In this case here, we're just going to check to see if the user guess was too low. So the way that we're going to do this is we're going to go ahead and use an else if or an elif, and we want to take the user guess, which is guess, and we want to see if that is less than the number to guess. So is it less than what the computer chose? If so, we need to go ahead and print too low. All right. And then the last part here is if it is not too low, it has to be too high. So I'm just going to put in here, it's too high by default. And so we can go ahead and do an else, and we can go ahead and print too high. Okay. Let's go ahead and test this out. See if we are still stuck in the loop if we don't guess it correct. Coming over to the terminal. Again, we're just doing a test after we write some code and test, write, and test. So here we go. All right, so we know that the computer chose 49. I'm going to go ahead and choose 90 in here, and it says that I'm too high. Perfect. Let's go ahead and choose 15. That's too low. And then we can go ahead and choose 49. Hey, we got it right. Okay. Now we're not done quite yet because we still need to account for what happens if I take more than 10 guesses. Okay. We need to track our attempts, and we need to decrease the attempts every single time we're through the loop. So we're going to do that next. Okay, so at this point here, we are ready to start keeping track of the number that they have left for attempts. So right off the bat, we want to go ahead and take whatever it currently is at this moment in time, and we want to go ahead and subtract 1 from that. So a real quick shorthand of doing that is just doing something like this. We're going to call out the variable, which is attempts, and then we're going to use the minus equals and then 1. So what this is doing behind the scenes, it's taking whatever attempts was, in this case here, it's 10. And after our very first guess, it is going to come down here and remove 1 guess from it. Because guess what? Here we are breaking out of the loop. So it never gets down to this part right here. And once it checks these if statements, it's going to come down here naturally and go ahead and remove it. So now that we removed it, now it's time to inform the user that they have X amount of attempts left. Also, we want to make sure that, hey, are these attempts, do we have 0 left? If we're at 0, we need to let the user know as well and go ahead and end the program. This will happen naturally, of course, once we do this. So let's go ahead and do if the attempts, if it equals 0, then what I want to do here is I want to go ahead and print out the statement here. Okay, so what this is going to do right here, we went ahead and put in here, sorry, you used up all your attempts, the number was, and then whatever it is. Because up here, we're getting ready to remove this as one of our final steps from testing, okay? But we can go ahead and check it out once we add this last else statement here. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll do else. We're going to go ahead and print, you have blank attempts left. All right, so in this case here, we have the statement here, you have, and then in the curly braces, we went ahead and put in here the attempts, and then we set it again here, attempts left. And hopefully this all works out really well. And one of the things that I wanted to point out to you, because like, why are we not putting an end game here or a break? When the attempts equal 0, we're just going right back to the very beginning of the loop. And it's saying, hey, is 0 greater than 0? It's not, and the game ends naturally. So let's go ahead and test this out for now. So I'm going to go ahead and guess 100. Okay. And now I'm seeing, hey, I have 9 attempts left, and I can go ahead and do 4. I'm going to keep on guessing here. And I don't know if we're going to be able to see it on the screen here. Let me see if I can shift this up for you guys. There we go. So we have 1 guess left. And now you can see this right here. Sorry, you used up all your attempts. The number that you were trying to guess was 28. Perfect. All right. Now at this point now, we should be able to remove this part here where it says the computer chose the random number. And if you want, we can go ahead and just comment this out here. And that way it's not printed there. We don't know what it is. We can truly try to guess it in 10 different steps. But anyways, I believe that this completes the program. Okay. All right. So long lesson, but hopefully we learned a few things along the way here, right? Where we learned about while loops. We did conditionals. We learned about Miro. and how we can use it to jog our flow of programming. And the thing that I hope that you got the most out of, which was, hey, let's code a little bit and then test it out. And that's something that new beginners, new learners, they don't seem to grasp very quickly, because they're like, hey, I got this, I'm going to go ahead and code through it. But it really helps with the programming and thinking like a programmer and going through the flow logically. Okay, so hopefully you like this video, and we will see you in the next one. Don't forget to subscribe. We need more of those. All right, take care.